Once again, Marvel fans, we've got a bunch to talk about with WandaVision Episode 6. The title of this episode being All New Halloween Spooktacular. We've got Quicksilver stuff, we've got a lot of eerie stuff, Vision finally breaking through the barrier, and yeah, I just would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below on everything. Not only I have to say, but maybe some of your theories and speculation on top of what I might get into in this episode breakdown, but I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's just get right into this. And even though I said let's get right into this, I want to thank my patrons who are appearing on the screen right now for helping me with this channel, the content, and supporting me for as long as they have. But yeah, let's finally get right into this. I need to talk about that intro, Malcolm in the Middle. I've always loved Malcolm in the Middle growing up. I've even got that, literally I think around a year ago, I got the box set of it. It's just fantastic. If you haven't seen it, where have you been all your life? Like, you've missed out on such a fantastic program, but it was just a delight seeing the intro to this particular episode. We had Wanda like brushing her teeth, very reminiscent of Lois. We had the kids, obviously reminiscent of Dewey, Malcolm, and even we had Pietro, you know, Quicksilver himself being reminiscent of Francis. And I thought it would just be the intro, but I didn't expect the majority of the episode to be literally filmed in a very, very similar way. We had the perspective of like Malcolm, because if you've watched the show, Malcolm talks to the audience. So it was brilliant. But as in the title of the episode, this is the Halloween episode, and it's kind of weird because the kids are older, but this is their first Halloween. But then as usual, guys, in this episode, and of course this would happen, we got little hints of eeriness. We had the lines of, "Mum's been weird since Uncle Pietro got here." And there was a lot of weirdness in this episode, to the point of where I feel like there's borderline clues now, and I really want your help to put some of it together. And we'll get to that when we get to that. And then we had Vision walking down the stairs, kind of like Hal from Malcolm in the Middle. He was talking about Pietro, and Wanda was just saying he's full of surprises, but yet again with that kind of 1,000-yard stare thinking look on her face, because she was basically more or less testing in this episode. And, you know, instantly from the get-go, I was thinking of what many people were saying. Who is this guy? Like, yes, Evan Peters from, yeah, and lots of people like to bring up the audio description of from the X-Men films, but there's lots of things that even though it says that, it's like, is it really him? Did Wanda actually make him, or did Mephisto send him? Was he just plucked out of another reality and brought into this? Like, it keeps getting deeper than that, but there's lots of comments I have for this specific speculation later on. But we had Vision saying he's going off to be undercover, neighborhood watch style, and we had that moment, of course, where Wanda's just like, but that's not what you're supposed to. Cut off line once again. That's kind of not a part of her script. Vision going off to do what he was going to do this episode. Also, by the way, love the little classic retro Halloween get up of Quicksilver when the kids kind of got dressed up and he just zoomed in and out. Love the effects as well of his powers. But meanwhile, outside Westview, since we're in the hybrid state of WandaVision now, we go to the real world and we see what's going on with Darcy and Monica and Agent Wu. They bring in the drone, and Monica is mad at Hayward for sending in that missile, and rightfully so, because there is definitely more going on with this guy. Lots of you guys spoke about that in the comment section last week, and I completely agree. Like, he's definitely got something against superheroes, and that even gets visited upon with him saying things like, Maximoff is never going to negotiate with us. We take her out, this whole nightmare ends. And this all boiled up like a kettle to the point of where director Hayward was saying that Monica has become a literal impediment for this mission now, constantly advocating on behalf of superpowered individuals. And he brings up, I know your history with Carol Danvers. Now, last week I brought up the whole this is an Avengers level threat. Yes, I know, like, when I talk about this stuff, it always gets misconstrued. I'm not saying the Avengers have to respond to this. I'm not even saying they're formed. I get things like that. Like, trust me, I was just saying you would have thought a government agency, and they definitely would be able to reach out to someone like Bruce Banner, who would then in turn be able to contact someone else. Of course, they have a resource to pull out of a book to talk to somebody to try and reach out to Wanda, but I wanted some kind of line of excuse for that, and obviously director Hayward was the obvious choice there, in terms of now it's being highlighted more than ever that he has some kind of, you know, stigma superhero individual, so it is kind of a mix of incompetence of S.W.O.R.D plus his own arrogance and ignorance to get help from anyone who knows Wanda, who may be ex-Avengers, or just somebody who could help at least investigate this anomaly. But the line of when he said that she's constantly advocating on behalf of superpowered individuals, it just summed it all up right there. It's just like, yeah, this guy isn't gonna ever really dare walking that line of trying to liaise with somebody like that, superpowered wise, who might be able to help. And I found this following line quite cool because it gave us a little bit of context as to why he may be where he's at, and how those who recently came back have the luxury of optimism, but those who remained and who weren't blinked out of existence view those people as they don't know what it's like. You don't know what it took to keep the lights on, kind of thing. And I think in director Hayward's mind, he's just stigmatized anything larger than life of your average human being with a job, you know? Anything like that, it's just like, F that, get out of here, I don't want anything to do with it. But what I'm wondering here is, even though this is giving us a bit of context as to why he is the way he is, I'm wondering if that's trying to give us a little bit of a red herring to distract us from something else larger going on with him, because now we're just thinking, oh, this is why he's like it, which might make us dismiss the other theories going on with director Hayward. I want to know your thoughts on that. The same thing with Agnes later on, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but they gave us a little bit of an explanation here that I feel like paints her in a different light, but once again, even with that context, it could be another red herring to try and distract us from her still being one of the things in the theories that many fans are suggesting with her. Either way though, very bold decision of director Hayward to basically say to the kind of rightful heir, if you will, of S.W.O.R.D, to say that you don't have the stomach for this job, and thus he kicks Monica, Darcy, and Agent Wu out. But the next scene after Monica got kicked out, I have a teeny bit of an issue with. Not a massive gripe, it's just something that I feel like could be taken better care of when you're doing something like this. So they knocked multiple S.W.O.R.D agents out in the heart, the core, the tent HQ of S.W.O.R.D, and they were happy showing multiple S.W.O.R.D agents going around in the background. My own issue with things like this is that did nobody see that? It's the kind of thing where they were 15 meters away, and if I was there, I would have heard the kind of beating and noises of multiple agents and well, 3 people knocking other people out. Call that a nitpick, but it's just realism that could be easily solved in a scene. It's just a little bit immersion breaking for a fan like myself when you have people doing that in the heart of a massive operation, and not only that, they show multiple agents or S.W.O.R.D members walking around in the background. Not even that far away. They were in the freaking camera shot. But we'll talk about the stuff outside Westview in a little bit. Let's talk about a very interesting line that was said right as soon as we got back into Westview. So we saw Malcolm in the middle style stuff going on again, and Pietro says to the kids as they run away, "Unleash hell, demon spawn." Now, yes, I know lots of people like to play both sides here. It's like, you know, oh, this could mean something, but also I believe it's just probably a line, and, you know, it's just a little tease or something like that. I'm caught in the middle, but obviously I just need to bring it up for the sake of it. You know, I'm not saying it's true or not. It's another Mephisto pointer. With lots of people saying, is Evan Peters Quicksilver or Pietro in this version here that was plucked from wherever the heck he came from? Is he Mephisto in disguise? If he's not, was he sent by Mephisto? When you add the line of "Unleash hell, demon spawn," you couldn't get any more on the nose with that. So instantly when I heard the demon spawn comment, when it was in relation to 2 kids who have literally in the comics, as we know with the twins and Mephisto's link, but I don't want to say anything there just in case they do bring something to fruition with that. It's very on the nose. And not only that, guys, the Pietro's hairstyle, did anyone think of that? Now, this one is a little bit reaching because you could argue it's the kind of flashy kind of like wings on the head, but it could also resemble horns. Ooh. Now, this is the part in this breakdown video, and not only that, in the episode where I feel like we're just gonna have to get an inspection lens and just look at everything, because there are so many little bits and bobs that add to everything theory-wise that we've been talking about thus far. So Wanda asked Pietro to remember when they were kids, the name of the kid who was trying to steal his boots, and even he says, you're trying to test me here. They openly acknowledge that he looks different, or like she's wondering as to why he looks different. It's like something that's pointed out where you would, if this was real life, have a larger conversation about it, but they bring stuff like this up, and then it just kind of dissipates. It's like the 1,000-yard stare happens again, or Pietro just walks off somewhere. It's like never fully addressed, and I'm like, well, why aren't you talking about it? I want to know more. This is also more examples of Wanda still not being fully aware in her own space still. Just like later on of what we'll talk about, she doesn't remember how this all started, which is another kind of Mephisto thing to talk about, because usually that is an effect he can have. And as I spoke about last week, whether Mephisto or however Mephisto is going to be introduced into this, if at all, I spoke about at the very least he could have given her some juice to help all of this Westview stuff happen in the first place, and as a result he will kind of collect his demon spawn as a spoil, or rewards if you will, for helping Wanda create a perfect home or world with Vision. And maybe Evan Peters here with everything he said, especially in that scene when they were sat down later, is a messenger of his, or maybe even him himself. I really want to talk about that bit, but we'll get to that. And this moment just more or less ended with Quicksilver stealing all the candy and pranking the whole neighborhood, and Wanda more or less finding out that Vision is not on duty. So Vision is up to something else, as she suspected. And so we pick up with Vision wandering around, and he looks at a woman in a front garden putting up some Halloween decoration, except she's repeating the motions of trying to clip the skeleton to the washing line, right? And that is just very eerie. Not only that, she's shedding a tear. So it's like these people, I don't know the explanation, but my best guess would be that if they're on the outskirts of town and they're not in immediate kind of vicinity of Wanda's power, if you will. So imagine like a beacon going out and out. It's only heavily concentrated on in the immediate area, and out here, maybe those residents aren't as locked in with their routine NPC cycle lives, if you know what I mean. So they're in the constant turmoil, just like as we've seen with Norm and everything like that, the pain that Wanda is experiencing, but they're not even, they don't even have the distraction really of going about their own lives. Now, amongst the Halloween festivities, we got a shot of a cinema in the background. We saw that The Incredibles was on. Very interesting. I guess maybe Wanda likes The Incredibles for that to be subconsciously placed in the cinema. But we also had The Parent Trap. Now, this is just me looking into it potentially, but that could just be a low-key foreshadowing of the fact that this is a parent trap, for how Vision and Wanda being parents to the twins is just kind of all one big trap for Mephisto, or like Mephisto style, collecting the demon spawn that was referred to earlier on. I'm not saying that's the correct interpretation, but the fact that the parent trap was being shown at the cinema, I like to think at least that it's kind of a low-key implication of, well, they're parents now. These twins, as in the comic book storyline, could be to indeed serve as a kind of Mephisto reward for everything that is going on here, and thus it is a trap of the parents, if you will. Now, I really appreciate the next line, because one of the criticisms I've heard from quite a lot of people is, what happened to Wanda's accent? She's Sokovian, right? Like, what, she had it a little bit in the first, but then it just went. And you could just say, oh, you know, she was living in America and she kind of got rid of it, but people were still like, nah, like, it happened too quick. So we had Wanda saying to Pietro, like, what happened to your accent? And then he literally said, what happened to yours? And then we had Wanda's face go, So it's like a very meta acknowledging of, yeah, like fans, we kind of realized that's a thing, and Wanda's vision just went. At least that's the way I view that. We also had Pietro addressing himself getting shot on the street, and then the next thing he knows that he heard Wanda calling him. So this could give us a clue to what we were talking about earlier, or like people were thinking, was he borrowed from an alternate universe? Like, this is a Pietro, this is her brother, but like a different multiverse version of him. But then for once, I was leaning into, as Wanda said, I didn't make that doorbell ring. Like, I just didn't. So like, this is why people were leaning into the fact that maybe he was sent by Mephisto, which I still think could be on the table. But when he said, I heard you calling me, that does imply that that was still Wanda who brought Pietro to the house, even if it was a recasting. Now, maybe it was just subconsciously, like that's what she needed in that moment, but I'm kind of 50-50, because this line does, as I keep saying, imply that if he heard her calling him, and let's just say he did get plucked from somewhere else, that's because internally her powers subconsciously willed for that to happen. But I still love the idea, as she said in the previous episode at the end, that wasn't me, I didn't make that doorbell ring, and that kind of leaning into the side of, well, if she didn't send him there, who did? Mephisto. At this point, we have Tommy finally get his powers. He's got super speed, just like his uncle. He starts running around like crazy, and this is when Wanda said, don't go past Ellis Avenue. And also that line was referring to Wanda knowing exactly what's going on. Like, I guess it's just she acknowledges that it's a freaky part because her role-playing powers of the people that put them in motion, maybe, as I said earlier, doesn't extend out that far. It just goes around here. I don't know. But very quickly, I almost forgot to mention Monica and the others back at S.W.O.R.D base. They managed to get into the surveillance building, looking at Pietro. They mentioned the recasting. Darcy is accessing the data on Hayward's devices, and Hayward actually figured a way to look back through the boundary and didn't really share it with anyone, and this program that he's got is tracking Vision, and it's actually very interesting the way he's tracking him, because it's through the decay signature of vibranium, because and it's kind of a messed up way, because yes, he's alive within Westview, but he is dead, and they can pick up where he is because vibranium is leaving the signature that they can trace through its decay. And as a result of that, they can also kind of get the other residents that are about within Vision's vicinity. Back to Vision. He's still wandering around on Ellis Avenue, looking at the people at the edge of town who are barely functioning. And ever since last episode, Vision, as I kind of mentioned, really just can't help but get to the bottom of what the heck is going on. And as a result of this, he's just like, right, okay, screw this. He gets back into his natural form and he kind of flies up above Westview and he notices that a car is stuck. And lo and behold, it's Agnes inside the car. And he asks her what she's doing here. Now, this really makes things interesting. And as I said, with maybe them deliberately throwing a little red herring with director Hayward earlier, I was wondering if they were doing it here. Because if they're not, then this definitely paints Agnes in a different light, because lots of people were thinking, what if it's Agatha Harkness who struck a deal with the devil, or she's an agent of the devil, Mephisto himself. But as I keep getting to, this just makes her seem like normal. So let's break this down. She seems really out of it. She has tears in her eyes, and that's very suspicious to Vision. So as a result, he touches her head to kind of snap her out of it and actually come to her real outside Westview persona. So she's fully aware now. Like, this isn't the Agnes version of her. This is a fully true to the core Agnes exposed here. And as a result of that, of course, she would go and mention that you're one of the Avengers. You're Vision. Are you here to help us? And as a result, he asks, what's an Avenger? Agnes asks if she's dead, because Vision's just like, why would you ask that? And she's just like, because you're dead. And then she just repeats dead, dead again and again and starts laughing maniacally like a wicked witch. Interesting. Agatha Harkness, right? But the reason why I'm not totally sold on this is because what if she's just faking all of that? Like, as in, like, yeah, she came to, Vision unlocked that, but what if she still tried to act a certain way so she still doesn't reveal who she really is? Because there's 100,000% something still going on more with her here. But this scene, as I keep mentioning, definitely does, if there isn't anything more going on with her, make her seem like a normal person. Oh, you're an Avenger, you're Vision, you here to help us. Oh, but you're dead. But then she starts going a bit crazy, and maybe you could just put that down to the fact that she's been stuck in there, right? But I don't know, man. Like, I feel like there's something more going on with her, just like a lot of us are thinking. And now I'm wondering of the possibility if she was still kind of keeping some of that close to her chest, so to speak. Back into the real world, and this scene, I was just like, yes, this is exactly what I spoke about in many episode reviews, and I was wondering if this leads to not only freaking Photon Mark II with Monica, but potentially a way to bring in mutants. Maybe they don't get brought in through literal, oh, open up the multiverse and grab a bunch of characters out, even though that could still very be the case. I'm not saying it isn't. But it's just like, I feel like 3,200, is it, people who are in Westview having their DNA to a molecular level having changed. That could introduce some interesting mutant things, if you know what I mean. So let's break this down. Monica wants to meet her guy to get back into the Hex, saying that the worst case scenario is that Wanda puts her in some ultra low rise genes or whatever. But Darcy says that she can't go back into the Hex because Hayward has her blood work, and once she looked through it, she told Monica that after having gone through the boundary twice, it has rewritten her cells on a molecular level twice. It's changing you. And as I said, I knew it. That's why the brain scan, like MRI machine, showed her head like scan blank in the results. I was speculating maybe this gives her photon powers, but now you have to take into account that 3,000 people are still in there having their DNA changed on the molecular level as well. So what if everyone comes out of there with powers? But that would suggest that you have characters like popular X-Men characters already in there, as in already in Westview, and that we just haven't seen them. But I just kind of doubt that. Like, surely we would have seen oh, that kind of resembles Storm or something like that. Yeah. But it still does beg the question of what if this still does birth mutants in the way that it is also probably birthed powers in Monica. I would love to know your thoughts on that, as to how you think X-Men are really still going to come into the MCU. It probably won't be on this level, but you have to think that this is, even though it doesn't add up completely here with what I'm saying, this is such a gateway. At the very least, on the base level, it is still a gateway to introduce a populace of 3,000 people with, well, mutated genes and DNA thus giving them powers, thus kind of making them mutants. I don't know, but yeah, let's move on. Now here comes a very interesting conversation between Quicksilver and his sister, if you will, Wanda. Now he asked the question of where were you hiding all of these kids up until now, because as we know, there weren't children in Westview before this. And that's actually a very relevant question that technically, this is what I mean, still doesn't really get answered. But as I said, this is where things still get interesting, because it's like, how do you know this, Pietro? Like, how? But he also addresses things that we have all been wondering about at the same time by saying things like the ethical situation of this all with Wanda holding people here captive. He says, don't get me wrong, you've handled the ethical considerations of this scenario as best as you could. Families and couples are still together. Most personalities aren't far off from what's underneath. People have got better jobs, better haircuts for sure. And Wanda even asks, you don't think that's wrong? So like, she's aware that what she's doing is kind of wrong, but she asks him for reassurance or some kind of affirmation. He's like, you kidding me? I'm impressed. So let me talk about this. I'm not saying he is Mephisto, but like, let's just say Mephisto did help her out with this. Just like give her the juice, as I said, to kind of make this reality a thing. And I want to talk about the next bit because this is important with what I'm about to say. He literally says, how do you even do all this? And she says, I don't know how I did it. Now that leads into Mephisto things, because often when you're kind of dealing with him, it can have that effect, like you don't remember the kind of origin aspect of things. And the way I saw this, when you look at it in the light of Mephisto, it's like he's casing out something that he was already involved in, like saying, how'd you do all this, Wanda? Like, I'm impressed. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, you handled all the ethical considerations of this fairly. It's like he gave her an opportunity. He's interested, even assessing, let's just say that Evan Peters Quicksilver here is some kind of agent of Mephisto or him himself, assessing his own involvement in it and just saying, you know, Wanda, like, you've handled the ethical considerations of this fairly well. Like, you know, families and couples are together. People have got better jobs. Like, you could have done it a whole different way with what I gave you, with what I kind of lent you the power to make this whole thing a possibility. I don't know. You kind of get what direction I'm going in here. I know it's kind of convoluted. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was such an odd conversation because we still don't know who or what or how with this Pietro, right? We just don't. And then all of a sudden he's talking about the ethical considerations that Wanda has had with this little get-up and pocket reality that she's got. It's like he's like, you know, grading his own thing, being like, look what you've done. Look what you've done with what I gave you the ability to do. She says, I only remember feeling alone, empty, just endless nothingness. And you could just argue as a result of that, with Wanda being who she is, with the incredible power that she has, after that endless nothingness came to its absolute peak and pinnacle point, maybe that opened up the door and tore with, I don't know, maybe her powers just exploded and opened up the gateway to her to speak to someone like Mephisto. I know I keep going on about Mephisto. I seriously don't know. I like to offer this in the videos for argument's sake. But as I said, look at that whole conversation that I just broke down right there in a different light of, as in a Mephisto light. And you can kind of see it as like a creator looking at somebody else, look at what they've done with his creation almost. Because, you know, technically Mephisto would have a part to play in this creation. But then, of course, we got another very eerie moment with Wanda looking at Pietro and seeing bullets in him and that he's dead. So that's interesting because it's like, well, did you die in the same way as the one in the MCU? Or are you literally the one in the MCU, but just with a different look because Mephisto didn't get it completely accurate? It's still so confusing. And even at the end of all of that, how would Pietro know any of the fact that this is a pocket reality? The fact that he could even bring up that she made ethical considerations with keeping people together, basically saying Wanda has done that, even though she's kept people captive, she's still done the best she could with making it like ethical, like as nice as she can to these people. Like, how would he know any of that? Like, why does he know any of that? It doesn't make sense. And so towards the end of the episode now, we revisit Vision going up to the point of the barrier. I've been waiting for this moment ever since we saw it in the trailers. And so he enters it and he manages to push himself through. This moment was really incredible, like really cinematic. I thought the acting was really on point, but also really sad. As I said, if you're really subscribed to this journey And obviously, you know what's happened in the MCU. It's pretty messed up because we saw that S.W.O.R.D responded, and once Vision entered the other side, it was kind of obvious what was going to happen. He's still kind of alive in a way, but let me explain this very quickly for those who don't understand it. Yes, you have things that molecularly change in there, come out on the other side, still being consistent with what they were changed with on the inside. For example, Monica's clothing, but the clothing isn't alive. It isn't sentient. That's another thing. So if you thought that Vision coming through means, oh, the clothes stayed in their state, so if Vision comes through the barrier, shouldn't he still be alive? No, because it's not the same when you kind of bring something like that in through the other side. Yes, you can still look the same, but to keep that part of you where you were alive in that reality into this reality where you actually died, it doesn't really have the same physics or molecular consequences or rule book to play by. He was grunging out in pain. The field was really also trying to keep him in. He starts getting torn apart. Some of his vibranium skin, if you will, was being sent back into the field. And I felt really bad for Vision dying here all over again. Like to the point of where he started crawling up like a beaten dog on the floor. It was horrible. And this is where we had Billy get his powers coming through, because I bet some of you thought coming through the episode, oh, it's only going to be Tommy with his speed powers, but Billy eventually got his, kind of reminiscent in a way of his father's, because I felt like they were depicting that throughout the episode. He was more like his father's son. He hears Hayward saying, wow, he really does want out, doesn't he? And Billy stops Tommy literally mid super speed run, which was pretty cool. This is all while Vision is screaming out for help as he reaches towards them, and he says that the people inside literally need help. And we even had Pietro saying, ah, come on, Wanda, it's not like your dead husband can die twice. I mean, Jesus, no wonder he got yeeted backwards. This just makes it... like, what is going on with Pietro? Even if you were a bit of a dick brother, you wouldn't say something like that. So yet again, it still begs the question of who the heck is this guy really? At this point, through Billy helping Wanda realize that he's out with the soldiers, she freezes the whole town and she goes into full Scarlet Witch mode. And she more or less expands the field area to try and save Vision, because she basically realizes that she can't make it out there in time to kind of pull him back in physically. So what's the next best choice? To expand your area of, you know, Westview, and that's the best way to keep him in, right? To expand it out, and then he will still be back within the town. Anyway, though, this is where stuff gets real. Like, shit gets real. The field engulfs helicopters becoming hot air balloons. All the barrier things become flagpoles. Hayward somehow manages to get away just in time in his car. Screw you, Hayward. Darcy gets sucked in there, so it's going to be interesting to see her in the whole, I guess, Westview persona. And that is it. Ultimately, I thought this since the beginning anyway, that you could kind of guess how this is going to end. By the way, I don't read any leaks. I don't want to know any leaks. I never do with stuff like this. It ruins the experience, in my opinion, versus if you went into it completely blind. I feel like Wanda's just going to have to accept, and this is going to be a very bittersweet ending. She got extra time with him, technically, through her own reality, keeping him alive. At the end, you know, when she realizes she's going to have to end this for the sake of that she's putting potentially people at life, or the reality of life as we know it at stake, with her possibly changing it with that field. Let's just say it has the potential to engulf the whole Earth or something, or at least America. She's probably going to drop it at some point and just be like, she's going to have to let him go. And that's, I think, going to break the heart of viewers, because we're going to have to see Paul Bettany's Vision go again in a very sad scene. Oh, man. How do you think this is going to go from here on out? What do you think of Evan Peters' Quicksilver? There is way more to him than meets the eye. I'm not saying everything I said is true, but I definitely feel like I'm digging in the right area, you know? But a fantastic episode. Fantastic. Loved probably everything about this episode. But I'm dying to know your thoughts on this down in the comments below. Go ahead and like it. Please like it. It really does help me out on the channel and helps this get out to more people who can hopefully, I don't know, join in the ride that we're all on in the comment section. And yeah, check out my top pinned comment where you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and help support me on Patreon and stuff if you want to. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Marvel people or potential mutants in the next video. Goodbye.